Thank you. So we call council to order, and before we move into the judicial inquiry report, there's a motion, and it is as follows: that staff report C 2021 -1 annual report on board and advisory committee activities from 2020 and priorities for 2021 be herein received. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Comey, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you. So that brings us to item 7.2, CAO 2021-2, Phase 1, Collingwood Judicial Inquiry, next steps. And I will pass it over. Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey. Sorry, Councillor, you're muted.
I clicked it, it didn't take. Thank you. I just wanted, before we got into the staff report, I just wanted to let you know my intention to ask for the clauses to be severed, and that eventually, after discussion, I have 2 amendments I would like to propose between receiving the report and proceeding with the request for proposal.
Okay, thank you for that. I think what we'll do is let staff take us through the report and have discussion, and then we get into the items. We will we'll sever them out. So go ahead, CEO Skinner. I turned my yuck off because my clock is going.
Thank you, Your Worship. What we'll do is, I believe the clerk's office has a presentation that was circulated earlier that will provide a high-level summary of the report. So I'll bring you through that quickly, and I think it'll come up shortly. I don't know if I'm just not seeing it. Oh, there it is. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Well, on the cover page here, I just want to say thank you, first of all, to all the people who've appeared and who've written letters. It's really satisfying to work on something that is this important to our community. We've done a review of the Justice's report, talked to a number of different folks and stakeholders, not in any sense all of the talking we need to do. But this proposal is coming forward for Council's consideration. We've anticipated the amount of engagement you desire, and we really look forward to your input so we can confirm and fully agree on the next steps. I think a sense of urgency does exist in pushing this, and it is balanced with our drive to assure that we've done a comprehensive and professional approach, and the work is well done. You'll see that this is largely forward-looking, and we've tried hard to figure out a way that will engage our stakeholders and partners in action. We want to distinguish the Collingwood inquiry from others in the sense that this is not shelfware. We want to work just as hard as we've done to date on getting the facts on the table to get the recommendations implemented, not only here in Collingwood, but more broadly across Ontario and potentially even influence on the Canadian scale. And I wanted to say thank you to Clerk Almus, who's done extensive work on the recommendations in this report. Slide 2. I'm not going to spend much time on this one. We talked about the timing earlier, but from a kickoff in February of 2018 through mid-2019 toward the end of 2019, there were 63 days of public hearings in 3 parts. And the long anticipated report that we thought we might receive early in the summer did eventually, with some COVID and other considerations, come to us in November with 306 recommendations. So those recommendations on the next slide came in a report that looked, had a front cover that looked like what's on your screen. And then the next slide, slide 4, is the key subject areas. These are the subject areas that the report was sliced into by the Justice Morocco. And you can see that procurement is the largest slice, and it's about 28% of the recommendations. And that's balanced by an almost equal number of recommendations that apply to council members and staff. And lobbying came behind that with a number of other topics. But of course, you can never judge a book totally by its cover, so the number of recommendations may not correspond with the difficulty of making sure some of these are implemented. But so far, the status that's shown on slide 5 shows the initiative that a couple of councils and staff have taken. And you have to remember, and I know council remembers, and I hope that the listening public will also remember, that the judicial inquiry was looking at a point in time. So since 2012, you'll see there's the largest blue slice on the left. There's about 43% of the recommendations have already been delivered, and about 21% are substantially complete. And as well, there's a number about municipal corporations that would no longer apply to Collingwood, but of course we'd want to promote for other municipalities. So things that we've done is a very long list, but everything from code of conducts for council, council staff relations policy, and a complete lobbyist registry program, among many others that are set out in the report. As well, despite fears of overwhelming the reader, Appendix A that's available online for the report sets out a detailed status for each of the 306 recommendations. And I did find, and I think Clerk Almus's work underlined this, that they're consistent. Many of them overlap somewhat, and there's a certain amount of analysis required to figure out where each should be implemented. Slide 6 starts to introduce a new concept, which is other recommended actions. And at this point, these are other recommended actions by staff. We've started this draft list, but there's things that don't come out of a judicial inquiry or that weren't in the recommendations, but we still think should be acted upon. So there's a few things that have been assigned to Collingwood. And that first bullet, the code of conduct and election training for potential candidates. But we really think these are much broader than Collingwood. And for example, the code of conduct and some of the key things in a code of conduct could be implemented as high in the hierarchy as directly in the Municipal Act. And election training for potential candidates, we welcome in Collingwood, but certainly every election candidate across Ontario could benefit from the same type of training. There's a number of changes to things like the workplace harassment and violence policies. In that realm, we're even looking at things like whistleblowing and how that would work, and the protection for people who want to speak up and ask questions and have someone of whom to ask those questions. We do think that there are some changes potentially in the judicial inquiry processes that would help to advise municipalities like our own as we go forward. Things like expected cost parameters, and if in fact, and there was a short discussion on this earlier tonight, if there are ways that a municipal council during or leading up to a judicial inquiry could manage costs or better articulate scopes with an understanding of what those might cost. There were also some questions raised about whether a simple majority, in fact, is the right trigger for something as impactful as a public inquiry. And finally, the recording of in-camera meetings was found very recently by our own council to be a practice you'd like to consider, you have extended, and that there may be broader applicability beyond Collingwood for that. So this is a draft list and something that we would continue to develop as we consulted with council, the public, and others, stakeholders. Slide 7. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but basically I mentioned that in the 306 recommendations, there's a lot of things that could be put in one policy or another. So we've started notionally to say that procurement bylaws, unsolicited proposal guidelines, and real property acquisition guidelines could be consolidated in a single consolidated procurement bylaw that would cover all of those items and look at many of the all of the considerations for selling or buying products as a municipality. Likewise, we've looked at the code of conduct and how to place that. A consolidated code of conduct for staff that would include ethical conduct. looking at a workplace harassment and violence policy with a focus on discrimination and human rights, and a couple of other items that are noted there and available to you in the report. Slide 8, it was our community-based strategic plan. Everything we do in this follow-up should help us to achieve the vision, the community-based vision that we set out, including transparent and accountable local government. And I think for me, I wanted to include this slide because it is a bit about timing expectations. Here, when we set this plan, we thought that in the short term, we would implement the lobbyist registry program. And in the medium term, between 3 and 5 years, we would do our implementation. Now, I think now that we've actually seen the report, we're going to far exceed, some of get things done a lot sooner than we thought we might when we set this up. But it is important to remember we're not at the end, but we're in the middle of a journey that's going to change many policies. It's going to change culture, and I think it's going to have broad influence. So there's a set of proposed motions that appear in the report. And if you go here now to this next slide 9, so we're going to talk about proceeding with a request for proposals, and a little bit hidden at the end of that one, I'll point out that we also propose that you endorse the proactive engagement of key partners and stakeholders. So the Fairness Monitoring Program is in slide 10. And this is something we have not had in the past, and it's not unheard of. There have been other ones, but basically it's looking to provide some type of independent assurance that significant procurements or sales are conducted in a fair, open, and transparent way. So a fairness monitor would observe the process, provide impartial opinions to council prior to an award decision, and then the decision to retain a fairness monitor is proposed to be at the discretion of the chief administrative officer. And it would be for any sort of significant procurement. For example, a complex procurement that you'll be presiding over in the next year would be an RFP for a reuse of the grain terminal. So that would be somewhere where we could use something like a fairness monitoring program. And we've proposed on slide 11, you'll see that we do this as an RFP. So we would because our integrity commissioner contract is running out, we would issue an RFP for joint services immediately for an integrity commissioner, a lobbyist register, and the fairness monitor. And you may be a little confused by the lobbyist registrar because we do in fact have an accountability officer position that has been doing the lobbyist registrar decisions. And it was recommended in the Justice's report that that registrar function, only the decision, is this lobbying or is it not, actually go to a third party that reports directly to council. So all the policy would be retained with the accountability officer. It's just those, is this lobbying decisions. A 5-year non-renewable contract, and the successful proponent would continue to provide training and be a resource for council, the staff, and the public. Slide 12 gives you a few logos of the folks that we're seeking your endorsement for proactive engagement with. The County of Simcoe, per your resolution at a recent council meeting, the Ontario Public Buyers, AMCTO, AMO, the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association, of course the province, and at both the staff and the elected officials levels. And we're hoping to also engage with FCM. On slide 13, there is the next part of the proposed motion, and it is that we are proposing that we write 3 white papers. Each white paper would set out the motivation to act, what the recommended changes are, and to whom the changes would apply. And we've set this out in 3 pieces because we were looking to truly engage people and to set a manageable scope of discussion with an effective grouping of partners and stakeholders. So hopefully you'll like this one, but the next slide, which is slide 14, groups what we thought might be the priority to proceed and how they would go together. So the session 1 would be all about the council and staff items. So earlier tonight, you talked about the priority of updating the code of conduct for council. So that would be part of the first session, as well as any policies about ethics and behavior. And Clerk Almas has done most of the writing for these updated proposed policies already with Jocelyn McCauley, our former accountability officer. And we're looking for endorsement to consult between mid-March and mid-April, with that white paper coming forward to council prior to being released. And then the second 2 sessions would be another one from mid-May to mid-June that talks a lot about procurement and lobbying and fairness. And a third one that's more about the process later this spring and into early summer. So judicial inquiry processes, advice to other municipalities, etc. Slide 15 talks about what we do with the white papers after we've had input on them. And the intention is that we would report back to you with a comprehensive set of recommendations for action. And I think that when you get those, I hope that what you'll be seeing is some of the best in ethical governance and transparency that Ontario has to offer. They will be well consulted and well informed, and per that schedule. It will also allow us to, and if you could go to slide 16, please. The 3 report backs, as you see them here, between May at the earliest, possibly June and September, would set us up well for a couple of things. One is that we have a 1-year report back to that's on our progress. That would come up in November. If it was deemed appropriate upon each set of council decisions, and if we were accepted by publishers, we could do articles on the findings and changes more broadly in places like Municipal World magazine or appropriate forums such as that. And it would also set us up very well for 2022 to potentially do things like, if accepted, speaking at conferences, potentially even AMO or FCM. Slide 17 is probably the question that everybody wants answered that we don't have an answer for you or the public tonight. So potential charges by the OPP. I have spoken with the manager that is looking into or making the recommendations on whether the OPP will make charges to any of the people who are engaged in these reports. They are still making their final decisions. I think they're getting close to them, but they didn't have a time frame that that they could commit to. But I did want to remind people, particularly those in the public, that the OPP has the sole role to determine if those charges are warranted. I did offer staff support if there was anything that could be made available from the town that would help them come to their decision. And they indicated they didn't need anything at this time and were very aware of the judicial inquiry's report and had reviewed it. And the judicial inquiry also did something that was mentioned earlier this evening, which is compelling the release of information that we could never have gotten as a municipality. So I have asked our inquiry council if there are any final sum up advice or actions that they think should be pursued. They have not yet reported back and tentatively been scheduled into a closed session of council at the next council meeting, but it will depend on the content of the reports that they wish to bring forward. So I'm just not sure. I think it will happen in the next couple of weeks, but I'm just not sure in what format until they've proceeded further in their review. The review that I have asked them to do is a very high level. We wanted to make sure that council direction was received on those next steps, if any, before getting too far down any particular path of action. And finally, at the last slide, we're just, as staff, looking forward to public and council feedback on what's been proposed and how we'll continue on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia, on the extensive report. And this is obviously an issue that is extremely important to our public and to this council. Questions, Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just a couple quick clarifications from the staff report and then just a few comments. So I guess through you to the CAO, because I think she addressed them, but I've never written a staff report. So under input from other sources, you've listed the two legal firms and the Integrity Commissioner. Did you, was there any input on this from either of the I guess CAOs that were to do with this before you?
Sonia?
Thank you. Through your worship, I have spoken with both of the CAOs, and one of them provided me with some informal input, and but not extensive input to date. However, I had considered both in trying to put the right information together.
Okay, thank you. And the second one, just to clarify, because you there's a difference, and I think you knew what you were talking about between the local OPP and the anti-rackets branch. So when you say that you've given a report or you're talking timeline, are you talking about you're actually speaking to the anti-rackets branch, or are you talking to our local OPP detachment?
Through the chair, your worship, to Councillor Berman, I would say that I am talking with the anti-rackets branch.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it if you can't say more than that.
No, I think they were quite open and transparent that we had spoken and that they were looking into it. What I quite appropriately couldn't get from them is where they will go with that now when they make their decision, hopefully in the short term.
I can appreciate that. I think I've heard the term active and ongoing for 8 years, so I'm used to that. So just a few quick comments, because what your and the clerk's intent was with this report, and the way that maybe my perception was in reading it might be the same, but I may not have taken it that way. So what I've jotted down is, I mean, while the inquiry was going on, I think I was hearing, I don't want to speak for anybody else, a combination of two comments. One was people that were saying, we all knew this was going on all along. And the other one was people in shock saying, I can't believe that this went on. Then the inquiry concluded and the report came out 3 months ago tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a lot of people that I don't think understood what the judicial inquiry could and couldn't do. So there was a lot of people saying, is this all we got? Was 914 pages and nobody was held accountable. And I think in all fairness, most of those people didn't understand that what the JI could and couldn't do. But as I say, it's 3 months tomorrow since the report came out, and we get your staff report. Council hasn't talked to our lawyers yet. And I'm sure it can't just be me that has questions. Council hasn't even really discussed going forward at the table, other than the night we all did sort of a comment session on it. So what I'm not finding in here, in your intent may have been, but it's not good enough for me, if I may, is a firm and aggressive timeline on speaking to the parties that know this stuff better than we do, the lawyers and your predecessors. I'd like to see that happen, and I'd like to see a fast discussion, not, you're saying that the lawyers may be ready to come forward mid-February, but none of this is sure. I'd just like to see us be able to look the public in the eye and say that we've explored all the options. And I think after 3 months that we're just getting started on this, I'd like to see us be a lot more aggressive at it. And I'm curious to see the comments of my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. CAO Skinner, do you want to respond to any of those comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think at this point, we'll just say I hear you and I understand.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions, Council? I have Councillor McLeod. Sarah, just before we get going, is there a procedural issue?
Sorry, Your Worship. Just a reminder that we are in standing committee and we should be opening it to the public.
Oh, yes. My apologies. All right, Sarah, do we have anyone in the public who wants to speak to this item?
Yes, we do. And just a reminder to the others that are attending, if you wish to speak, please press the raise your hand feature or *9. We do have one individual. I believe it's Mr. Fryer, so we will allow him to talk.
All right. Mr. Fryer, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. And I won't be repeating anything from earlier as procedurally, that's the way to do it. Firstly, I agree and support the assessment that regarding the inappropriate and untrustworthy actions of the individuals identified in the police report, as well as the Commissioner's findings, the OPP will determine what their next steps may be. I had stated at the November 4th SIC, when the initial draft staff report was verbally presented, that I could only provide brief comment, but would follow up in written form after further consideration, which I did during the course of what was the 3 months of time, because in December the focus was on moving through budget, and January's scheduled SIC was canceled, contributing to your packed agenda today. Following the November meeting, I did offer to assist senior staff, as was intended with the legal representatives and the former CAOs, to hopefully provide my insights. It wasn't deemed necessary, so I have continued my independent analysis work. I will require further cooperation, though, going forward, because my preference continues to be to first run things by senior staff to obtain the factual detail that I require before addressing council. There are matters about this draft report that still stand out to me after staff's additional clarifications in the presentation. My input mostly centers around what is noted on page 7 in regards to the community-based strategic plan objective to continually improve Collingwood's financial context. The table on page 5 really is a summary of direct costs, and what's listed in paragraph 2 should include that there was some participants' cost coverage too. I specify about this because, as I previously submitted to Council on the December 23rd consent agenda, the associated cost control measure that I exercise by representing myself, avoiding legal and back office expense for Collingwood, appears to be the only control that was ever exercised. I will further address this in my more detailed response when I provide my written response on the questions from the delegation portion. Regarding the table salaries category showing $250,000, this is an example of why these are direct costs. It is my understanding that even though I was assured in March 2018 that all costs for inquiry-related staff undertakings would be tracked and recorded, this was not done. Therefore, the indirect cost, if you want to look at it that way, has not been recorded the way Staff Report T 2018-06 required that it should be. There are other costs too, such as EPCORs, that likewise should be reported in an overall total cost report. I look at it this way. If I was in a public position and a colleague from a peer municipality that was considering an inquiry asked as to what the cost of Collingwood's inquiry process has been, I wouldn't only use the amounts listed on page 5 to provide an accurate response. I also would add that footnote 5 on page 10 contributes to the continually confusing cost references that have plagued this matter from the outset by indicating that there was an original estimate of between 1.5 to 2.5 million. This is the first time I can recall seeing anything about this as the original estimate. It has no source indicated either, so it would be beneficial to see that cited. I submit that this historic report needs to be updated to ensure that it is factually accurate as possible. In addition to the above, it should include a proper financial timeline list, because of all the various estimates relating to costs and funding that have been presented to the public over the past 3 years. Regarding Section 5, effect on town finances. It also only reflects about anticipated direct cost impacts. It suggests that any expected costs will be covered by the budget. Is the 2021 budget amount the $700,000 that staff stated in local media on December 15th, which I utilized along with others in our observations? Even if it is a different amount than the $700,000, the correct amount should be stated there to avoid any further confusion. In my opinion, the suggestions I have respectfully made would help the report provide the full and transparent financial context required to meet the community-based strategic plan's objective. Additionally, it should help to minimize the chance of erroneously identifying observations that are utilizing publicly stated amounts as inaccurate. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present. Hello?
Thank you for that, Mr. Fryer. We have your suggestions and we'll deal with them accordingly. Sarah, do we have anyone else who would like to address council?
Your worship, it looks like there's no further requests to speak at this time.
All right. Thank you for the reminder, Sarah. All right, council, are there any other questions or comments on the staff report? Councillor McLeod, and then I have Councillor Hamlin and Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions about the report. Looking for some clarification on a couple of issues, and one of which is partially touched on by CAO Skinner when she said that she's had get out. Sorry, my dog wants to play. When she was talking about having spoken with our legal counsel, and I wonder if maybe we could just, I could get you to expand on that and to talk about what it is that was discussed and what the likelihood is that we will actually have an in-camera discussion with our legal counsel sometime before the end of this month.
CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor McLeod. So we provided a set of questions to our JI legal counsel, straightforward questions, which is, are there any legal avenues that the town, could or should pursue? And was there any comments on the process and how to better manage the process in the future? Were the two that come directly to mind. And they have committed to come to a session of council within February. So I believe that to be the first meeting in February.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, was there discussion with our either counsel for the town or counsel from the judicial inquiry about litigation, either against or for or by the town, or private prosecution? And this is to follow up on, of course, what Councillor Berman was talking about with the fact that what I hear from some quarters is this all we got? And why is no one going to jail? And on and on and on and on. These are the things that keep getting said. And I want to be able to say that we have explored every single possible option, not only for getting perhaps some of our money back, or at least having a sense that justice was done and seen to be done. So I'm curious to know whether that conversation has begun, and I'm curious to see whether that conversation has begun.
I think CAO Skinner appreciates it. It's we have to be circumspect about the aspect of those conversations, sure, and the content covered.
Yes, and through your worship, yes, I don't think I was clear enough when I said we'd spoken with our legal counsel and asked them specific questions. That was the first of the specific questions. Are there paths with respect to litigation or money recovery or anything of that sort that we should be pursuing, and what might be the benefits or disbenefits of pursuing each of those paths, so that council at a high level could make a decision on that prior to taking further steps. Because I do think that and I hear loud and clear, and staff have at front of mind We want to make sure that we've truly taken all the actions that need to be taken with a balanced professional advice. So I'm trying to say in different words that I fully agree with your question and your observations around moving forward, Councillor McLeod.
Follow up, Councillor McLeod?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to have to figure out a way to make council and council with an S and with a C sound different. I'm getting confused in my mind regarding them. I'm interested to know regarding the lobbyist registry and the piece of the motion that is that contemplates that. Does that going to mean that we here at Town Hall are going to have one fewer staff member on our headcount list? And are there budget implications of that? And was that person included in the 2021 budget list that we passed in December and so on? Could you elucidate some of that for me, please? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, we won't have one fewer staff member. So our accountability officer position is it does the policy and strategy and operations of the lobbyist registry, as well as a number of insurance and risk items, as well as being in charge of procurement. And I think I've forgotten at least one other piece that falls into that person's bailiwick. And what the Justice recommended is that one small part of that, which is the actual decisions on is this lobbying or not. So the registrar's decision would go to an independent third party instead of a staff person, and that independent third party would report directly to council. So we do need to figure out in going forward with an RFP that includes this lobbyist registry set of decisions that we would have the funding to do so. But it's not, I'm not intending in any way to propose that we reduce that staff member who has those other obligations, such as managing the procurement program. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Councillor?
Thank you. In the appendix to the report and I've lost the page number at this point, but it is item number 19 in that sideways spreadsheet that we were sent. Item 19 is stated as being complete, and I am curious to know how that is so when I've never provided any financial disclosure and I wouldn't know where on the website to look for it. It's about financial disclosure by council members, and the list is that it is complete.
I would have,
Go ahead.
through you, Your Worship, I would have to take a look at that. If it does say complete, that would be in error, but I know that Clerk Almus and I have discussed it a number of times and neither of us considered it complete. In fact, it is one of the recommendations that I think does require some more discussion about whether any person in Ontario running for public office should have all of their business dealings, debts, and finances disclosed to the public, which would be potentially a more extensive disclosure than that's required for a federal politician or the Prime Minister. So we'll take another look at that one. Thank you for pointing out number 19 being marked incorrectly.
Yes, the CEO is right. I think that's one of the discussions that Justice recommended there be provincial communications on that item.
Super, thanks. Just a couple more. So in the 13 weeks since the release of the report, has there been contact with entities like PowerStream and EPCOR and Sprung and BLT with an eye to some of these possible next steps? And if so, can you expand on perhaps what that communication was? And if it hasn't taken place, whether it is contemplated? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
CAO?
Staff have not reached out to PowerStream, EPCOR, Sprung, or BLT specifically to look at next steps or what might happen. And certainly I was waiting for our legal advice prior to reaching out to those entities. There is an EPCOR Town of Collingwood liaison meeting that happens regularly, but that meeting is not about these types of topics, about coordinating activities within the community. So I'm sure EPCOR, as the other entities, are probably aware that the report's been published, but we have not, sought out their participation or comments from a staff perspective.
Thank you. And I'm interested to know through you, Mr. Mayor, and this is rather a delicate one, and I would like to provide the caveat that I intend to impugn no one's reputation or behavior, but I do think that not only, what is that old phrase? Not only does justice need to be done, but need to be seen to be done. I think that, so my question is, with those caveats in place, was there any consideration given to the fact that the bulk of this report is being written by a person who was called to testify at the judicial inquiry?
I think I'm going to defer that question. I think that's a commentary about an identifiable individual, and that's not suitable for open session. So I'm going to defer.
No, thank you. Thank you for preventing me from getting sued. I appreciate that. Last one. Can you tell me, CAO, through you, Mr. Mayor, what is the status of some of the entities mentioned in this report? For example, that solar vent program that was talked about quite extensively. Has that been discontinued, and has that been discontinued?
I'm not sure that was identified in the report, other than the fact of its existence at the time that the bills went out. So I don't know if CEO Skinner would have an answer to that question.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not aware of the solar vent program being still in existence, but it's a good question, and we should follow up on that one. And I do believe I would want to comment on the earlier question as well about the author of the report. And I think that this report does deal with a number of things that are very much aligned with the work of that position and have been well researched. And there should be no concerns in that realm. And if we do need to take that offline, I'd be more than willing to have that conversation because it is a very important one to have about our valued staff.
Thank you. Noted. And I, as I said, there was a caveat there. I just wanted to be sure that the public is also assured of these things.
Thank you.
That's the bulk of my, that's the last of my questions. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the hard work that went into this.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Next, I have Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, and through you to the CAO. Two of my questions have been answered because I am, like most members of council and the public, feeling that I'm looking for some resolution to the OPP investigation and or to our options for further civil or other litigation, but I had a good answer to that. The second question was in regard to the potential duplication between the accountability officer and your recommendations for kind of a modified role for integrity commissioner. So that leaves me with just one final question, and that is, if you can help me to understand the reason for the proposed white papers. Are you expecting that those papers would deal with recommendations that are already included among the 306 and how those would be knitted into consolidating bylaws for procurement and code of conduct and council staff relations and so on, or these white papers to answer questions that go beyond the recommendations, and as an example, should the decision to pursue a judicial inquiry be subject to a 2/3 vote of council? if a municipality should have access to provincial funding to support findings that are beneficial to all municipalities, which, by the way, was a good get and a good recommendation, and so on. So if you can just help me to understand the reason for the white papers, because it then takes us into another, 5 months before we seal this up and put it behind us once and for all.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Doherty. That's a really good questions. Essentially, the colloquial term white paper would typically be used when you were creating legislation or regulation or bylaws, when you had the draft of what you thought you were going to go forward with, but you weren't presenting it in the debate hall as you wanted to go out and get some public input on it first. So the idea with these is to take the recommendations from being 306 lists to a set, a relatively small set of bylaws and proposed changes to legislation at the provincial level and things of the sort that could then be commented on quite directly by the public and by council in how we wanted to move forward. And you'll notice that the third set of consultations gets into your last couple of questions, the things about, what should be kicking off a judicial inquiry. Should funding be available to municipalities in Ontario who are going to, considering going forward in something like a judicial inquiry that will have benefit across the province once those findings are brought forward. So the intention is to change the recommendations from a bulleted list to true products that council would then, be commenting on and ultimately we hope endorsing, and to also follow up on those other issues in the third part of the session. Thank you.
Any follow up, Councillor Doherty?
No, thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have some comments. And I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of knowing we had some residents coming to speak to us about the costs of this. And reading the report, which maybe I should start by saying thank you so much to our CAO and staff for this report. It was very well thought out and a very professional approach to taking this to the next and soon to be last steps on this. But what I ended up thinking was that the problem we have that we're facing here is, in my own view, the result of the failure of successive provincial governments to address the municipalities' needs in holding judicial inquiries. And I say this because I looked at it. We are given a few sentences of guidance in the Municipal Act. If there's a matter that is connected to good government of the community, or maybe you think something bad's happening, you can hold a judicial inquiry. That's what the province says to municipalities. However, if the province wants to investigate something at the provincial level, they call it a public inquiry. And there is a whole piece of legislation, there's a regulation, there's rules. And in fact, one of the rules is that they can set the budget for the commission and a timeline for completion, right? So where's that in our rules? There's nothing. But if the province is paying, they can do that. And I just looked around on the internet a bit, and I could see there was a commission that, under the Public Inquiries Act, that reported in 2019 on long-term care homes. And on the website, they actually had the fees set out for reimbursement for lawyers who were having their fees paid because their clients, were entitled to this benefit. And the fees were all set out. And just to give you an example, if you were a senior lawyer, in other words, practicing more than 10 years, the maximum fee was $192 an hour, which I would hazard to guess was a fraction of what we were paying for legal counsel, having not seen the bills. So I also think that looking at the report, so many of the recommendations were procurement directed. And I counted, I think I counted 83 plus recommendations. This is not a new problem for municipalities. And, it can happen anywhere, and it has. And the judicial inquiries that have happened at municipalities have largely been because of procurement issues. The question of a fairness monitor, which is an excellent idea, someone who knows about these big projects, is retained, comes into a small community where there's no staff who've done anything like that before, and they actually help and then advise council as to the fairness of it. Why isn't that part of the rules already for municipalities? I noticed the staff report quoted from the report a comment from Justice Denise Bellamy, who did the Toronto inquiry years ago over the, computer scandal, because they were buying computer equipment. And what Denise, she was in my law school class. Okay, what Denise said was, procurement is the biggest shopping with the people's money that gets done in government. This is not a new thing. So, and I have one more I'm going to address, but I will first. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was conflicts. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. For how many years have the province been asked to expand the use of who has a conflict? Imagine if brother was in that list, but nothing's been done. And I say all of this to say, and I know that we are asking the province, cap in hand, to pay for part of this because it's going to benefit other municipalities. I also think we should make a submission to the province saying, you've put us in this box. You've given us no tools to set a budget, set a timeline, set maximum fees for lawyers. You have given us no direction on procurement policies where this has been a continual issue at municipalities. You have not amended the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act in so many ways that would have benefited us. Don't make another municipality go through this. So anyway, those are my rants for today about our need to make a submission to the province, which I would hope staff would take under consideration and bring to us for a review. Thank you.
Sure, all good considerations, Councillor Hamlin, and certainly the conflict of interest and procurement issues go back to the Toronto inquiry that Justice Bellamy handled, and as well the Mississauga inquiry that Justice Cunningham handled, and he wrote a lengthy decision about the conflict of interest in the private sector and how that it's more stringent than in the public sector, which sort of defies logic where we are dealing with public funds. So these are all very big issues that we will be advocating to at the province, and that forms part of the motion for the Simcoe County. And as well, we will be lobbying AMO, FCM, and other municipalities and upper tier governments across the province. We need a full court press on this. Any other comments or questions, Council? Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, sir, and I appreciate everyone's comments before me. I just want to state that I actually read this report 3 times, hoping that I missed things the first 2 times, but unfortunately, the 3rd time left me still quite frustrated, and I will share my frustrations now. Bylaw updates are fantastic, but I firmly believe those who are responsible for this need to still be held accountable. Councillor Hamlin brought up a good point. The province put us in a box with this. I don't believe they did. I believe the people that made us launch this or put us in that box, and they should still be held accountable. The 3 white papers are very interesting, and I look forward to the recommendations coming at the end, because I'm really pushing for a very more rigid timeline for this legal advice. But I believe those white papers will be viewed after what happened to this community as not enough. So my fear is timeline for this council to act, for this 9 people around the table that were elected in 2018, that if this pushes into 2022, this could unfortunately put us into the lame duck period that this council cannot act on the recommendations. And that puts a little bit of fear into me, because I was part of the one that pushed for it, and I would like to be, I was here at the start, I want to be here at the end. So I look forward to listening to Councillor Jeffrey's amendments. I agree with Councillor Berman that we need a more rigid timeline. And I really look forward to, as I said, listening to Kathy's amendment. So Kathy, please put up your request to speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. Are there any other comments or questions? I see Councillor Jeffrey's card go up. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I don't think it's the time yet for me to do the amendments, because I asked for the time to be after we received the report. But I will speak to the fact that as a member of the council who voted in favor of doing the judicial inquiry and has quite a commitment to it in terms of seeing this, I feel that I need to be much more engaged in terms of the information that we are going to get from the lawyers and that we are hopefully going to garner from other partners. So I think that council's engagement needs to be not receiving information distilled as well-intentioned as it might be from staff, but that we need to have face-to-face meetings with the people involved in this in terms of the legal counsel for us and the former CAO. So that will be the impetus of my amendments to come, and I will speak to them at that time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the report before I read in the recommendation? Seeing none, then I'll read in the recommendation and I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. It's staff report CAO 2021-2 Phase 1 Collingwood Judicial Inquiry Next Steps. The resolution is the council herein receives staff report CAO 2021-2 Phase 1 Collingwood Judicial Inquiry Next Steps. And the council authorized proceeding with a request for proposal process for the recruitment of an integrity commissioner whose powers and duties are set out in the Municipal Act 2001 and who will report directly to town council and jointly serve as lobbyist registrar and provide fairness monitoring services and the proactive engagement of key partners and stakeholders. And that council authorize the development of 3 white papers outlining potential changes to respective policies and practices, as well as the judicial inquiry processes, with the intention to engage the public, including a virtual, if necessary, public town hall meeting, and engage Collingwood consultation for each, as well as direct consultations with stakeholders, including other municipalities in the province. And when I said virtual, if necessary, that doesn't apply to the public town hall meetings there for sure. It's just whether or not the forum's virtual. And finally, and that staff report back to council with a comprehensive set of recommendations for action after each consultation. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that motion, please? Moved by Councillor Hamlin and seconded by Councillor Doherty. And we've had a request to sever. So the first item that we'll be voting on is that council herein receives staff report CAO 2021-2 Phase 1 Collingwood Judicial Inquiry Next Steps. Are there any comments or questions on that aspect before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. The next paragraph, and that council authorize proceeding with a request for proposal process for the recruitment. Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
I was kind of hoping to do my next 2 amendments within this before proceeding to the next one.
So you wanted to do it after the vote on the receiving the report?
Yes.
Yes. And so is the amendment amending this particular?
It's an addition to by amendment.
Okay. All right, then go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I don't have the benefit of whereases and explanations within an amendment. So this first amendment is going to reiterate or enforce something we've done. It's going to expand what the mayor's role should be. And then I'm going to ask for staff resources for the mayor to do that. So the wording's been provided to the clerk and to the CAO ahead of the meeting. And that council here and endorses the mayor's advocacy efforts regarding the recommendations of Justice Morocco contained in the final report of the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry to seek support from the County of Simcoe and other parties as deemed appropriate by Mayor Saunderson to call to the attention of the government of the province of Ontario its responsibility to consider and effect recommendations within provincial jurisdiction contained therein, and that council herein directs that the CAO designate to Mayor Saunderson the staff resources required to conduct his advocacy work in this regard.
All right. And do we have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Berman. Councillor Jeffrey, would you like to speak to this first?
No, I'll speak if needed at the end. I think it's self-explanatory.
All right. Are there any questions or comments on this amendment, Council? Councillor Hamlin.
Can this be sent to us? I mean, it's quite a long amendment. Or can it be read again?
Councillor Jeffrey, go ahead.
Slower?
Okay.
And that council herein endorses the mayor's advocacy efforts regarding the recommendations of Justice Morocco contained in the final report of the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry to seek support from the County of Simcoe and other parties as deemed appropriate by Mayor Saunderson to call to the attention of the government of the province of Ontario its responsibility to consider and effect recommendations within provincial jurisdiction contained therein, and that council herein directs that the CAO designate to Mayor Saunderson the staff resources required to conduct his advocacy work in this regard.
Councillor Hamlin.
Sorry, I'm wishing I had more time to think about this. I'm finding it a bit unusual that in the midst of seeking a provincial appointment, we're appointing the mayor as our advocate at the province to lobby for changes that are needed. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just putting it out there as something I'm finding a bit unusual. And I guess if I was going to support this kind of thing, I think maybe with the deputy mayor, because I just, anyway, as I say, I find it at a time when, you know, well, anyway, I don't want to get into it because it, you know, but I just don't think it's the right time, you know, for the next 3 months that this is the mayor's job with staff. So, thank you.
Thank you for the comment. I can indicate that I've spoken with the registrar from, or the clerk at the County of Simcoe, and the fact that I'm seeking a nomination does not impact in any way my obligations or role in my current office. And I don't think it would at all impair my ability and objectivity in carrying forward this role. That said, in the motion that I brought before council, I asked council to authorize myself and the deputy mayor to go before Simcoe County. So I have no concerns if someone wants to amend that, make that amendment to add the deputy mayor. I have full faith in the deputy mayor, as I have full faith in each and every one of these council members.
Okay, well, I would make, if Councillor Jeffrey would be agreeable, I would amend her motion to add the deputy mayor to that job.
I'm happy just to add that as a friendly amendment because I mean, it would default to the deputy mayor, I would hope, in any event in the case that the mayor has to step aside from his responsibilities. So,
thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments, council? Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I suppose through you to the clerk and CEO, you know, similar to Councillor Hamlin's comments, I thought we were working really hard to try to get these type of amendments, if they're provided in advance of a meeting, to all members of council so we can fully read and digest them. You know, it is difficult to hear and process and then come up with questions, especially about something as important as this. It's not that I don't appreciate what you've put forward, Councillor Jeffrey. I think just to be fair to all council members, it's helpful to get it in advance. And then as a question, please, to you, Mr. Mayor, can you kindly elaborate, if you're aware of this amendment, what resources mean in terms of like, what is a staff resource? Is it a fax machine or is it 10 people in a room?
Well, I think it's probably somewhere in between. I think it's just authorizing staff to direct staff time, or the CAO, sorry, to direct staff time for any PowerPoint presentations, supporting material, debriefing notes, or briefing notes for the ministers or whoever associations we may be dealing with. So I would think that that would be the staff time involved, and I would look to CAO Skinner to see if that makes sense, or if there are things I am missing, or if those are unnecessary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff time is always dedicated to anything that's provided as a direction of council. So I think that portion is unnecessary. It should, should the first portion go forward. And if you feel it is necessary, that's probably a good reason for an offline conversation, because of course the business of council is staff's business to carry out. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we can certainly provide the supports of the type you just articulated without problem.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor Coleman? I think she may be frozen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor. I don't know if I'm cutting out. Am I cutting out?
We can hear
Are
you.
you frozen? No.
You're frozen, but we can hear you. Or we could. I'm sorry, you are cutting out, Councillor Comey. If you want to log out and come back in, I'll recognize you when you get back. If you have further comments or questions. Councillor Doherty and then Councillor Berman.
Thank you. I'm wondering if I should just hold my comment, because it was going to be kind of a response to Councillor Comey. So maybe I'll wait till she's back on.
Okay. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I had one question. Now I think I have two. So through, I guess I'll just look for Councillor Jeffrey to nod. The way that I hear this amendment is basically last week we had to vote to give you and the deputy mayor the authority to go to county to advocate for us. And this is just expediting the process that now you can go do this to 440 odd municipalities without having to bring each one to council. Is that really the intent of this? Councillor Jeffrey?
Through you, Mayor Saunderson. Yeah, it is the intent to expedite it and to widen the scope so that the mayor isn't having to check in with the CAO for each and every entity with which he is going to advocate to make this happen. So I think it clears it up for the CAO as well.
That's the way I took it. And my second question, or ask for direction, probably through you to the CAO. I never thought this would happen because I've never been through this before. I don't follow or I don't take part in party politics. I didn't think it was going to creep into my municipal council. I'm happy to address it under other business if you prefer, but I'd like to maybe throw out there that you find a way that we don't. I'd be the first one to call out the mayor if he was using this as a platform, but I also don't want to call him out, have someone call him out if he isn't. So maybe under other business, we can talk about that.
Yeah, we'll deal with that under other business, certainly.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could, I would just wanted to make a comment on Councillor Jeffrey's words about widening the scope. I think how I've looked at it as a staff person, I absolutely respect how council may look at it differently, is that the entirety of council should provide the direction, and also that some of the things that we want to change may require some more analysis. So an example that we had there earlier today was there was some recommendations on election training, or even what's in the code of conduct potentially being now our recommendation that also be part of the provincial package. So if as staff we've expressed any reluctance, it would be simply that we want to provide you with the best available information to go forward with, as opposed to having to check in with the CAO, because I think that's not the intention, just that we develop a plan that council likes, and we will 100% support you in rolling that plan out. Thanks for the perspective. It was good for me to hear those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Comey, you can cut out in the middle of your comments, so I'll give you the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. My question was, I suppose, to you, sir, what you envision is the feedback mechanism as this move forward? Do you plan to bring regular updates back to council as you progress? Would it be a PowerPoint or a staff report of your own doing? Can we have an idea of what the outcome of this would be?
Well, the outcome hopefully will be that we get a lot of action across the municipalities of Ontario to force the government to take this seriously. And how we report back could be any one of those formats. It would be certainly an update to council, whether it would be an SIC or a council meeting. I don't think that would change the impact of the update. We could have the presentation that I'm providing to the other associations and municipalities, and we could have the feedback that we received from those associations and municipalities. I think the key point here, from my perspective, is that we need to be out there pushing this thing at every turn that we can. And we've seen the municipality of Toronto, they passed the City of Toronto Act after the Bellamy inquiry, but it didn't really impact the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act or the Municipal Act. Same after the Mississauga inquiry. And those are two very major municipalities. So we need, I think, to bring as much pressure to bear on the province to make these changes on the third call. Third time lucky, but this is not acceptable in the municipal sector moving forward. And if you consider that of the 440 municipalities across Ontario, 25% of the population, or 75% of the population lives in 25% of the municipalities or less, largely in the GTA area, we need the support of all the municipalities across Ontario to make the voice of a community with less than 50,000 people heard. So I think the mission here, number one, top priority, is to get the attention of the province to change this, because I think the changes will protect other municipalities and the changes will give credence to our request for reimbursement or funding to supplement the immense contribution and investment our communities had to make in this judicial inquiry. We've gone $8 million down this road. We need to go all the way. Any more questions, Councillor Comey?
Thank you for asking. No, I do not.
Okay. Councillor McLeod?
Just a comment regarding that might help my colleagues process what is in front of them. I've noticed at the county council meetings, when an amendment is brought forward to a motion on an agenda, that amendment is broadcast on the screen. And I wonder if just quickly, someone could cut and paste what Councillor Jeffrey provided earlier today onto a Word document and then have that screen shared. If that would be of assistance to all of us, I know it would be of assistance to me.
All right, I'll look to the clerk. Sarah, is that possible? Councillor Jeffrey, you had a comment?
Just specific to that, Mayor Saunderson, I did just send out my notes on the amendments within to everybody's council email.
Oh, well, there we go.
Okay. And I think there was a change to the wording to include the deputy mayor as well in that.
Yeah, that's not included in my notes though. Thank
Okay.
you.
Councillor Doherty?
Thank you. I personally understand the motion as Councillor Jeffrey has read it in, and further, I'm quite supportive of it. I actually see this as a way of expediting our intention with the province, well, with the county and with the province, to lobby for these changes to the Municipal Act. In effect, what we're doing, in my view, is adding 2 more sets of brains and 2 more pairs of hands to the work that is involved in advancing these kinds of policy changes to a higher level of government. So I have no concern in supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Is there any success? Is everyone able to read that? Can you maybe enhance the, thank you, Sarah. All right, is everyone able to see that? Okay, any other questions or comments on this, Council? Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just instead of doing this each time, I mean, we've spent several hours talking about an $8 million judicial increase. I think all these severed things, I'd like recorded votes on so that people know where council stands on them. So I won't ask for one after each.
Yes, I've got that. So for all successive votes on this item, we'll be asking for recorded votes.
Yeah.
All right, Council, if there's no other questions or comments, then I will pass it to Clerk Almus to call the recorded vote on the First Amendment as amended by Councillor Hamlin. And it was moved by Councillor Jeffrey and seconded by, so I've lost 2 seconds, Councillor Berman. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Clerk.
Sorry, Your Worship. My apologies. So I haven't had a chance to really look at these amendments. It was circulated after 5 o'clock to me, and I'm just struggling with whether it's an amendment or whether it's a notice of motion.
Okay, well, it is on the topic of the staff report, so I would have thought that it wouldn't require an independent notice of motion.
All right.
And my understanding, I guess, further, Sarah, is that the recommendations are made at the SIC committee do not bind council and would be requiring a separate vote as it comes to council as well. So I think based on that, okay. I'm going to rule that unless you think otherwise, that these are amendments to the main motion.
All right, I will proceed with the recorded vote as requested. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your yes card. Thank you. Motion is carried unanimous.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And just for clarification, Councillor Jeffrey, you had another motion or amendment before we go to the next item? You're just on mute, Councillor.
Sorry, I do. Okay, and so all councils received this, and the CAO received it before 1 o'clock this afternoon. And that council herein directs that a special meeting of council, including in-camera sessions as necessary and deemed appropriate by the clerk, be held prior to February 28th, 2021 for the purpose of a meeting of council with the Town of Collingwood's legal counsel for the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry to receive and discuss their final report on representation of the town in this matter and to receive legal advice on next steps regarding the testimony, outcomes, and recommendations, and b, a meeting of council with the Town of Collingwood former CAOs John Brown and Farida Min independently to provide the former CAOs the opportunity to provide their input on the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry report and next steps. and that council herein directs that the CAO obtain from the legal counsel for the town of Collingwood for the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry a written final report regarding their work outcomes and any recommendations with respect to the CJI, and that that report be provided to council no later than 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and that members of council be required to submit to the CAO their questions specific to the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry recommendations and next steps for response by any or all of the above parties no later than 72 hours in advance of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Do you have a seconder for this motion? For an amendment. I've got Councillor Berman. Okay. Do you wish to speak now or at?
After, again, I think it's self-explanatory.
Okay. Was everyone able to read that while it was up on the screen? I'm getting nodded heads. I just want to make sure everyone's had a chance to read it. So before I start the discussion, I did have Councillor Hamlin, but Councillor, did you have a specific question, Councillor Comey?
Sorry, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Pardon my ignorance. Are we saying this amendment was circulated in advance of the meeting?
I think Councillor Jeffrey indicated it was sent to the CAO this afternoon and then subsequently to the clerk and then circulated. I don't know. Councillor Jeffrey, was it circulated after that to council?
I just sent it to the council members, Mayor Saunderson, after their request to see it in writing. So I sent it directly to Councillors Comey, Hamlin, whoever, the whole team.
Okay.
About 10 minutes ago.
Maybe Clerk Almas, if you could put it back up on the screen for a couple of minutes for people to read and think about, and then we'll come back and have a discussion.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, while I'm on mute and saying that, because don't we have an obligation for our public to see this too? I mean, with it up on the screen, I mean, it's a lot to ask to digest on the fly, and then also for our public to just be hearing it and trying to follow along too. So I think I'm so grateful to Councillor McLeod's suggestion that this also become visual.
Yeah, and it's going to go up right now. Thanks. Sarah, can you increase the font a little bit? Thank you. All right, Council, have you had an opportunity to read this? Okay. I think I saw Councillor Hamlin, then I've got Councillor McLeod and Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our CAO. One of the suggestions in this amendment is that we invite our former CAOs, John Brown and Rita Min, to provide their opportunity, provide input on the report and next steps. So do you know whether, let me put it this way, would you be providing them the report you've provided to us tonight and then asking their recommendation? I got a few questions, and then asking their recommendations. Or two, have you spoken to them? Do they want to participate, and would they have recommendations? And three, are we charging them? Would they charge us for their services in this regard? That's my first question.
First question with three parts? Okay. Yes. CAO Skinner.
This is not my proposal, so I can't really speak to the intentions. But if, with respect to that point, I have spoken to them both past CAOs. I think it's up to me to decide who would provide information to the report, other than the council, because I think that it is very clear that town's legal counsel should be providing that advice directly to council. I can't remember if I said this, but one seemed more inclined to participate than the other. And we would pay them for that time on a consulting or contract basis if the CAOs did come forward with their thoughts on the report or the recommendations. Thank you.
And sir, just as a follow-up to that, in your view, and I know you're a bit on the spot here, do you think this is a helpful endeavor for us to be spending money on?
CAO?
I think if it was helpful, I would spend the money, and I wouldn't need this direct instruction from council to do so. We already have a contract with CAO admin that I can call upon when necessary. I appreciate the desire for council to speak with these experts, certainly people who are very familiar with the process and what has happened and contributed during the period. I don't think the costs of the CAOs are significant within the town budget. It really should be made on the principle of council's needs and my own. I do think, however, that some of the instruction with respect to the written report from our lawyers, that's in the final clause, second final clause about a written final report could be somewhat more expensive, and we might want to consider the costs of that or get an estimate prior to moving forward.
Mr.
Thank you. Thank you, CEO Skinner. That was my second focus of questions, which was, asking a lawyer after a hearing of that nature to do a final report, without some way to put some scope around it, couldn't itself become a 1,000-page report. So, and my other concern is if we're going to ask for recommendations that I would like staff's input on, or do you think it's worthwhile through you, Mr. Mayor, to our CAO, to have staff input on the scoping for the recommendations? Because, like one thing that struck me, just as one, small example, when I mentioned earlier that I had looked at that website for the public inquiry for the long-term care homes. Well, our lawyer was one of the commission counsel. So for example, I think it'd be useful to have him do a bit of an outline of how that act should be amended to include, judicial inquiries called by municipalities along the lines that I outlined earlier. But so again, my question then to you, through you, Mr. Mayor, is would it be helpful to have this section scoped by staff and come back to us, or can you do it on the spot?
CAO Skinner?
I have to think that through. The meeting of the legal counsel with all our counsel, the other spelling of counsel, we've already set that up. I believe it will be at the first council meeting in February. And we've given council an upper limit, a modest number of hours to use for their preparations. So those high level preparations, which included process as well as, the various legal avenues that may be open to the town. But it didn't include a written report. But it did include the chance for council to ask their own questions directly to council. So we think we've rescoped that one responsibly, at least for the first step. With respect to the CAOs, John Brown and Frida Min, I have been pursuing what I think to be, the right course of action to get their input. And I think if there's questions that council have that they believe need to be answered, we could certainly put those forward or we could seek the answers. That's about all that I can say right at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin, any other questions?
I guess just a comment at this stage, Mr. Mayor, that I think perhaps A is not necessary, and that our CAO seems to have in hand a meeting already set up, and that maybe we should take the opportunity to ask our questions at that meeting before we make a decision on bringing a vote back to discuss a final report being needed from our legal counsel. And that with respect to B, I think I would recommend following the advice of our CAO that she has this in hand already, and that I certainly, for myself, don't feel the need to meet with our former CAOs to get their input. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod?
Thank you. I have, so my comment is, I don't see what it could hurt to talk to the people who were the genesis of the judicial inquiry to see whether the questions that they had that went unanswered prior to February of 2018 have been answered in the work that was done by Justice Morocco, especially if it already falls within the purview of our expenses, and I think it can't hurt to ask, no matter what, and find out what they have to say. They could very well turn us down. And so could Mr. McDowell turn us down. But I think it can't hurt. I mean, I am quite frankly baffled that we have not heard from them yet, particularly Mr. McDowell, because I got a traffic ticket once and got a debrief on the way out of the court with my lawyer. So I don't understand how we spent $8 million or however many million we spent with his particular firm, and we haven't heard from him in the 13 weeks since the report came due or came out. I'm baffled by that, and so I don't think it can hurt to ask. And and frankly, I think with the amount of money that we spent, we should get something in writing from him on how he feels it went, or what got left out that ought not to have been left out. I don't know, something. I want to leave no stone unturned in this process. And I want to be able to look people in the eye at the grocery store, if ever we can go live into a grocery store again, and say, we did everything that we can possibly do to figure this out. And so I will be supporting this amendment and anything else we can possibly do to get it figured out.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty, I have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm of the view that we have spent enough money on this inquiry. We have 2 preliminary reports coming from phase 1 and phase 2. We have a 900-page plus summary and recommendations from our Justice Morocco. And I see no point in asking for anything further. I cannot imagine that there would be anything further coming from our former CAOs or our council, but more bills. So what I would like to ask is that if we could, Councillor Jeffrey, if we could sever your second amendment, A and B, because I would support the first part of the amendment, item A, having to do with in camera and speaking to our legal counsel regarding next steps in terms of the testimony, outcomes, and recommendations, but I would go no further.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Hall.
I'll just be brief, and that is that I would like to support the amendments as they've been presented. I too will echo comments of Councillor McLeod and a few others that I very much would like to hear from our two former CAOs if they permit time and are willing to contribute. And in particular, I'd like to hear from our solicitor. I completely agree from Councillor McLeod's perspective that, and I'll add to it, that throughout the entire process, we had a couple of occasions to go in camera and speak to our solicitors. And it surprises me that we have not had that opportunity since the report was delivered by the Justice. And specific to Mr. Brown, former CAO Brown, there may be no person in this community who is as invested in this entire process as he is. And I would very much like to hear from him whether he feels that this report delivers on something that in large part he started. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Berman.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Sampson. Quickly, A, I'll be supporting this, and B, I don't know the right words, but it fascinates me that both former CAOs were considered valuable as witnesses in parts 2 and 3 of the inquiry, but not relevant to come and speak to council. So I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I suppose, this motion makes me think of that concept, a meeting that could have been an email. So I guess my question is to you, sir. Councillor McLeod's deeply concerned that we haven't heard from our solicitor. Have you attempted to call or reach out to them subsequent to?
I don't have that authority. I can't contact, neither can anyone of council contact our solicitors or any other our consultants independently. That all goes through the CAO. That is a council direction to staff. So the answer to that is no. Okay,
for that reason.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and the second part of my comment is I agree with Councillor Doherty. I'm at my absolute spending limit for our taxpayers when it comes to this. I feel very confident in our CAO and the reports we've received and our path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey, you asked to go last, so I will make my comments, and they're just very simple. And that is that this motion is not at all, in my opinion, to be a reflection of the hard work that this current staff has put in. This has been a massive undertaking, and to come in without having experienced, well, I think, first of all, the decisions of 2010 and 2014 to 2014, and then the follow-up through 2014 to 2018 that gave birth to this judicial inquiry. I think it is a very difficult task to try and understand, not the intellectually understand, but to understand, I think, the emotional toll and the grips of that decision that the past council went through to get to the decision where we are today. And so for that reason, I believe that hearing from the former CAOs who had lived through that to get their perspective is not, I think, inappropriate. But and so I will be supporting it. But we had from Councillor Doherty a request to sever, so we will be voting on item A of the Second Amendment first, and then the balance. And Councillor Jeffrey, you have last word.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I think that my colleagues have covered most of the points that I would have. I don't know what I don't know. I do think it's odd that we would not receive a final report from our solicitors in such a public and I think will be a precedent-setting ruling or report going forward. And so I'm very much hoping that this is supported so that we can leave no stone unturned.
Thank you. So first we will be calling the vote on item 3A, and there's been a request for recorded vote, so I will pass this to the clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I'm just looking at the motion. Did you the request to sever, was it just taking B out and the remainder of the entire amendment staying as is?
I guess a very good clarification from Councillor Doherty. Councillor Doherty, was it just taking B out separately and keeping in the successive paragraphs, or was it hiving everything below A out? Sorry, Councillor, you're muted.
Would be taking everything below B out for me.
Okay, so we've severed everything below B, Sarah.
Okay, that is great. A recorded vote has been requested. All those in favor, please raise your yes cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your no cards. Thank you. Motion is carried.
All right, and then the second motion is for everything below a B, or a B and down. So it includes the meeting of council with former CAOs and the town direct CAO to obtain from the legal counsel for the town of Collingwood, for the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry, a final written report with questions to be submitted 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and the council may submit questions to the CAO for our council 72 hours prior to the meeting. I'll pass that to the clerk, please.
Certainly, a recorded vote has been requested for this. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your yes card. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your no. Thank you. Motion is carried.
All right. And then that brings us to the second paragraph of the main motion. And the council authorized proceeding with the request for proposal process for the recruitment of an integrity commissioner whose powers and duties are set out in the Municipal Act 2001, and who will report directly to town council and jointly serve as lobbyist registrar and provide fairness monitoring services and the proactive engagement of key partners and stakeholders. Are there any questions or comments on this paragraph, council? Seeing none, I will pass it to the clerk because there's been a request for recorded vote.
Certainly, Your Worship. A recorded vote's been requested. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your yes cards. Thank you. There's no opposed. Motion is carried.
All right, and the third paragraph, and that council authorize the development of 3 white papers outlining potential changes to respective policies and practices, as well as judicial inquiry processes, with intention to engage the public, including a virtual public, if necessary, public town hall meeting, and engage Collingwood consultation for each, as well as direct consultations with stakeholders, including other municipalities and the province. Council questions or comments on this? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'd like to defer this paragraph, and just to give you a heads up, the next one as well, until we have received all of the information and answered any questions council has through our process with the former CAOs and our legal counsel.
Okay, and my understanding from your last amendment is that we're hoping to have all those meetings concluded by February 28, 2021. Is that correct,
Yes,
Councillor Jeffrey? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you're asking that this be deferred until those processes are complete?
Yes, I am. And according to the CAO's updates or information for potential, we may be done with it prior to February 28th.
Okay. Well, this is a request for a deferral, so there's no discussion. Councillor Berman, are you seconding this? Okay. All right, we have a question for a motion to defer this so that staff can have the benefit of the information collected at the meetings that we have just passed in the amendment. Councillor Berman, do you want a recorded vote on this? Okay, so we had a request for a recorded vote. Clerk Thomas.
Certainly all in favor of the deferral, please raise your yes cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your no card. Thank you. Motion is carried.
Okay. So that brings us to our next report, which is staff report C 2021-2, Establishment and Terms of Reference Affordable Housing Task Force. And I will turn it over to staff. Who's presenting this? Go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, Your Worship. Just as a reminder, we're coming up to the 5-hour mark, which we would need a motion to extend. So based on priorities right now, I don't know if you're interested in moving the tax relief staff report first, and then council can decide should they wish to hear the other ones this evening. We can proceed with those.
That's a good suggestion, Sarah. Let's do that. So that takes us then to staff report T 2021-1, COVID-19 economic relief, tax penalty and interest relief be received, report penalty, interest and relief. And so who will be presenting on this from staff, Sarah or Sonia? Who will be dealing with this? Monica, welcome.
Yes, our new treasurer on her very first day as official treasurer status, our treasurer Quinlan, please.
Thank you, Sonia, and welcome Treasurer Quinlan. And it's great to have you in the office and the beginning of a long, auspicious relationship. So if you can take us through this report, that would be great, please.
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. So I'll try and go a little bit quickly, but over the last couple of weeks, staff has had quite a few calls from residents and taxpayers with concerns about being able to make the due date on February 19th. So looking at that, we did reach out to several different municipalities to find out what they were doing and how they were treating it. We did get a response that out of the 9 municipalities in the area were also providing tax relief. Pardon me, I've got a frog in my throat. We then took a look at how much penalty and interest we generally accumulate over the last couple of months, and it looks like it's about $20,000 per month for the current year's taxes only. So it would cost us about $40,000 a year at this point to go forward with this. Or sorry, $40,000 over the next 2 months to go forward with this. We as staff felt that there was quite a bit of pressure on our taxpayers and our residents given the continued pandemic for COVID. And we felt that this was a relatively, little impact way to provide some relief as much as possible for now. So that was kind of my take. And I'm sorry, I have a really bad frog in my throat. So I think that's it.
All right. Thank you. Council, are there any questions or comments on this item? Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Through you to Treasurer Quinlan. How will this be applied automatically, or would the residents have to ask for relief?
So our thoughts are that it would be applied automatically, so across the board for March and April. For those residents that are on the pre-authorized payment plan, they would have to request to be removed from the pre-authorized payment plan. And of course, then interest and penalties would not apply. And then when they did want to go back on the PAP plan, they would have to request to be resubmitted or re-added to that program.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments, Council? I'll read it in and then I'll look for a mover and a seconder then. That staff report T 2021-1 COVID-19 economic relief, tax penalty and interest relief be received. And the council authorizes staff to waive penalty and interest charges for the months of March and April 2021 with respect to the current year's taxes payable only, i.e. for 2021 only. So can I get a mover and a Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Berman? We've had questions or comments, so unless there's any pressing issues, then I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you, Monica. You hit it out of the park. So then we've got, so Sarah, I guess we have a decision to make. We've got 4 hours and 50 minutes on this meeting. We have two items that we have not yet dealt with, which are the establishment in terms of reference affordable housing task force and the committee and board governance review. Given the late hour, if council, is there opinions amongst council that these are urgent issues that need to be dealt with now? Seeing none, then I guess go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't realize it was rhetorical. No, I didn't feel that they were urgent. However, I was going to suggest that perhaps we could deal with them later this week as opposed to putting them off for any lengthy period of time, certainly not until next month.
Yeah, I don't know if we can do that without striking a special meeting. So I guess to you, Sarah, is there a possibility that any of these items could come up at a standing committee meeting other than the SIC, you know, so that it gets to council before or this month?
Through your worship, we could recess the meeting and reconvene at a later date, providing, you know, not shorter than 48 hours notice of when that meeting date's going to be. So if the committee preferred to recess this meeting, we could work with members of council to determine an appropriate date that works with everybody's schedule.
Okay, well, if that's the case, could we not recess it until next Monday and start at 2 in the afternoon on that day, since we seem to have cleared these days? So perhaps, if I'm seeing heads nod, but is that agreeable to everyone that we will recess this so that we can reconvene the SIC meeting next Monday, February 8th at 2 p.m. Does that work for everyone? Okay, Councillor Hanlon.
I'm perfectly fine to start at 2, but I would just ask if we could have an hour break before the start of the Development and Operations Committee meeting.
Let's hope we can do that. I think we've broken the back of a significant meeting here, but so we would just have the two items, I guess, departmental updates before we break today. I do think we should be giving an opportunity for public delegations, and then we would have an adjournment. So we would pick up next meeting covering the establishment in terms of reference for the Affordable Housing Task Force, the committee and board governance review, and then other business, because I did indicate that I would add that to the agenda. So there's a couple of items under other business. Hopefully all of that would take less than 2 hours in order to give us an hour before the development operations meeting. So if we're going to proceed on that basis, then Sarah, if we provide an opportunity for deputations, we've got 5 minutes left. Let's see how we go.
Certainly, we do have a request, Your Worship, from Matthew Pretty. So we will enable him to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Pretty, can you hear me? There you are. All right, Matthew, you've got 5 minutes and we're under a time constraint here. So go ahead, please.
Oh. Sure, sounds good. Yeah, I've got the list straight here. I was just reading this. I won't comment on the two deferred subjects. The housing is very valuable. I'm curious with this. I'd like to talk about COVID actually, and the COVID situation in respect to obviously the ski report, and then just briefly, I think we should definitely
Matthew, you're breaking up.
Closed.
Are you able to, Matthew? Are you able to turn off your video and see if that helps your bandwidth, because you're breaking up on us? Okay.
Well, I'll keep it brief then. Just to work with the town in the sense of what's closed and what's not closed. Just help with that more. Focus on that more. That's what I'd like to say. Yeah, turn your attention away from, old business And I think we need to really look at what's happening right now and get into that, you know, get into that in a different way. So that's my message tonight. Yeah, that's what's on my mind. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. All right, Council. So I think that brings us to our adjournment. And Councillor Jeffrey, are you prepared to move an adjournment?
Mayor Saunderson, I'll recess.
Oh, sorry, yes, we're recessing. Yes, thank you for the correction. All right, we're recessing till next Monday at 2 p.m. All in favor? All right, thank you, Council. That was a busy night. Sarah, just as we sign off, are we going to proceed now to the corporate comm standing committee meeting, or what's the, how should we deal with that?
Certainly, Your Worship. It's up to you. We can start at 7 o'clock. If anybody needs longer than that, we can do that. It's however members are feeling right now.
All right. So the corporate commercial or community corporate services committee, how do you feel about starting in 10 minutes, which would take you to 7:05? Is that sufficient time? All right. Thank you. So we are now recessing, and the corporate and community services will be convening at 7:05.
And again, when you join, it will be live. So just be cognizant of that.
On another link, Clerk Holmes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. For everyone else, good night. It's been a busy day. Thank you.
Sorry, you're muted.
Better that way than the other way, I suppose. I will call to order this meeting of the Town of Collingwood's Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee. It's February the 1st, and it is 5 minutes after 7. And I will acknowledge that that Collingwood is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. And so since this is the 1st of February, which marks Black History Month in Canada, I want to take a moment to recognize that as well. 1619 was the year the first slave ship arrived on the shores of North America. And in 1946, Canada's civil rights movement became public when Viola Desmond refused to leave the whites-only section of a movie theater in Nova Scotia. She was convicted of tax evasion in the amount of 1 cent. The judge in her appeal upheld the conviction on a technicality, even while admitting that Canada also had Jim Crow laws, just like the United States. We remember these sorts of things during Black History Month, and hopefully someday in the future all year long. As Women's Study Professor and BCMLA Rosemary Brown said, until all of us have made it, none of us have made it. And so I will call for the adoption of the agenda of this evening's Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee. Looking for a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda as presented, Mayor Saunderson and Councillor Madigan. And I will hand over the meeting to Clerk Almas at this time for the election of the chair and the vice chair.
My apologies, Chair McLeod. We'll just call for the vote on that adoption of the agenda.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. All in favor?
Perfect. All right, great.
And now
thank you very much. So as this is the beginning of the new year, we will be doing the election of the chair and the vice chair. So I will be running the election process. We will be starting with the position of chair first and then proceed to the position of vice chair. You are able to nominate yourself or nominate someone else. Once the nominations are closed, I will ask if those nominated wish to allow their name to stand. Those wishing to have their name stand will be provided a maximum 1 minute to explain why they believe that they would be the best candidate for the position of chair. And then we will call for the votes. Is there any questions regarding the process? Thank you. All right, election nominations are opened. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Clerk. I was prepared to say if it's not broke, don't fix it, and then she messed up the vote, but I'm still going to nominate Councillor McLeod as chair.
Perfect. All right, is there any further nominations for the position of chair? Going once, going twice. No further nominations. Chair McLeod, do you wish to have your nomination stand?
I do.
Thank you. Then you are chair by acclamation. At this point, I will open up nominations for the position of vice chair. Councillor Berman.
Thank you again. I will nominate Councillor Madigan, please.
Certainly, Councillor Madigan. Any further nominations for the position of vice chair? Going once, going twice. Seeing no further nominations for the position of vice chair. Councillor Madigan, do you accept the nomination?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Perfect. And by acclamation, you will be the vice chair of the Community and Corporate Services Standing Committee. All right, Chair McLeod, you may continue.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 4 in our agenda, business arising from the previous meeting. Is there any business arising from the previous meeting? Seeing none, we move on to declarations of pecuniary interest. Does anyone on this committee have a declaration of pecuniary interest? And if so, Say it now or forever hold your peace. No, you can say it anytime through the course of the meeting. You don't have to hold your peace. Seeing none. Moving on to item number 6, which is reports and minutes of other committees and boards. And the motion is that the minutes of the various committees and boards provided below be received and recommendations contained therein be approved. Now, I'm just turning to you, Clerk Almas. One of these contains a presentation. Ought we separate, or do we receive them all and have the presentation at the same time?
Certainly, we can proceed with 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and then we'll receive the presentation from our Trails Advisory Committee after that. Active transportation and trails.
That the minutes of the various committees and boards provided below be received, recommendations contained therein approved. Those being item 6.1, the Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes from the regular meeting held December the 10th, 2020, the regular meeting held December the 15th, 2020, and the regular meeting held January 14th, 2021, as well as item 6.2, Museum Advisory Committee minutes from the regular meeting held January the 21st of 2021. And item 6.3, the Trails and Active Transportation Committee Advisory Committee minutes from their regular meeting held December 10th, 2020, and the regular meeting held January 14th, 2021. I will need a mover and a seconder to receive those reports. Councillor Berman and Vice Chair Madigan, and all of those in favor. Raise your rest cards. There we go. Thank you. And now we move on to item number 6.4, which is the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee 2020 activities and 2021 goals. These sound very familiar. I think we're going to get a deeper dive from Vice Chair Justin Jones, and I believe he's with us. Clerk Holmes, can you let him in? Thank you.
Yes.
I am here. Whoa, that was like weird low light thing going on. Yeah, long time no see for everyone here. Obviously, gave a brief overview today at the Strategic Initiatives Committee, but I would like to provide you guys with a little bit more of a robust update in terms of what the Trails and Active Transportation Committee is up to and what our priorities are for 2021, as well as just taking a moment to celebrate some of the successes from 2020. So next slide, please. So I wanted to highlight that 2020 was a good year for construction here in the town of Collingwood. We connected a pretty key route through the Hamilton Street through the Central Park corridor, some construction down on High Street near the new Summit View subdivision, some construction out near Cranberry on the trail out there, and some ongoing construction of the George Christie Nature Trails. As well as some work down by the Harbor View. So next slide, please. So just to highlight some of the work that was done, we saw the nice paved connection through Central Park, providing a 3-meter multi-use trail that connects the Hamilton Street 6th Street bikeway onto over to the Hume Street bike lanes, which is a great little connection. The Harbor View Boardwalk, which had been damaged by fire, finally replaced and repaired, despite the pressure-treated lumber shortage that we experienced this year. But we were able to repurpose some of that lumber and use it for the Cranberry Boardwalk, the one immediately below there. So we were able to reuse some of that, and some of the bridges that have been deployed across the trails network are starting to near the end of their useful life. One of those was the Harbor View Trail Bridge, and then there's another one that's under construction currently that I'm going to get to in the next slide, please. I guess after the trails map. So we printed, I believe, 40,000 trails maps this past year. We did that before COVID. So we ended up with a little bit of a surplus, but Trails Maps distribution continues to be very successful, especially at some of the more what we would call kind of passive distribution nodes. So that the map boxes along the trails, of course, a lot of our retail partners, which are very valuable for the ongoing support of the trails, were not able to distribute the Trails Maps as easily as they would normally, but we still had good, strong distribution, and we'll continue to distribute the 2020 map into 2021 just because we had lower than expected distribution. Next slide, please. But 2020 was not without its challenges, and many of those challenges made themselves felt on some of our trails. So the Hen and Chickens Trail is still somewhere out in the Georgian Bay. We're not entirely sure where. The Sunset Point Park Trail was washed out repeatedly, despite staff's I would say relatively Herculean efforts to try and shore it up. Heritage Drive, I mean, these are just places where when the Georgian Bay decides it's going to take some land back, there's not really a whole heck of a lot we can do. And so just we need to, I just want to be really clear that we're so thankful that the town has been moving to shore up the shoreline and to make sure that these facilities are going to be able to continue to be operational as we see shoreline fluctuation in the future. Next slide, please. So I want to just quickly recap some of the accomplishments. I think that one of the things that we sometimes fail to do, especially as a Trails and Active Transportation Committee, is take a moment to reflect on the really strong successes that we've seen and the amazing partnerships that we've built with the town and the staff. So the establishment of the committee itself was a wonderful partnership between the committee and town staff. The committee in its previous iteration as a Trails Committee worked very hard to create new terms of reference and expand the scope of what we aim to do to support trails and active transportation in the town of Collingwood. So that was a really great first step. We've continued to work on the George Christie nature trails, widening trails, adding culverts, making those a really great Four Seasons trail connection. Resurfaced and widened 1.5 kilometers of existing trails. Our trails being primarily stone dust means that they are subject to vegetation encroachment. And so by widening those out and resurfacing them, it keeps them useful. It keeps them to the kind of standard 3-meter width that we want to be looking for our trails. We presented a proposal to council for the Maple Street Quiet Street project, and we thought that was quite successful. We went out and did some traffic and pedestrian counting for that project as well, using a video detection device that gave us some very robust data to use as a baseline to establish how that project works once it's launched as a pilot. We donated additional funds to make sure that there were bicycle lights distributed through the Health and Community Wellness Initiative. We completed our renewal application for the Share the Road Bicycle Friendly Community designation. Collingwood is currently a bronze BFC, and that was designated in 2016, and it's a 4-year designation cycle, so the town was required to reapply in 2020. And then we have been working to advance the Collingwood to Village Trail route by resolving some of the crossing issues and continuing to work with private landowners as well to try and get that project over the finish line. Next slide, please. So let's talk about where we're going into 2021. So next slide, please. So I just want to highlight that 2020 was a remarkable year in trails use. When you see the statistics that show the trail use year over year, what we're generally seeing is about a 40 to 50% uptick in the number of people that were using our trails. We have been seeing that trend not only here in the town of Collingwood, but really all across Ontario. Next slide, please. These are some trail usage statistics that were collected and shared at the Ontario Bike Summit in 2020, and they show just different trail usage statistics from all around Ontario. So trail use has spiked in 2020 as people look for something to do to keep them outside, and I think we've all heard stories of the bike stores being sold out of bikes, and just a general kind of desire for people to start using those trail and active transportation amenities more and more as 2020 moved on, and we hope to see those trends continue into 2021. Next slide, please. So I wanted to highlight some of the ongoing engagement that the town has been doing. I'm getting some echo from a little bit. I think Councillor Berman, I think your mic is still on. If you could mute, that would be great. I'm just getting some echo and feedback. No, not you? Okay, I'm not sure who I'm getting echo from. Anyway, oh, it seems to have stopped, so there we go. So I just wanted to highlight some of the ongoing engagement that's been going on by the town on some of our, bigger, more broad consultation, and the official plan, which I would say has been an absolutely resounding success in terms of the amount of engagement that's been generated, has really been, it's really showing what the priorities of this community are. And I would say that they largely align with a lot of the other planning documents that the town has had in the last decade. But when we went out and asked, when the consultant went out and asked what the top thing that folks wanted to focus on in the official plan, they came back with the survey results, and 5 of the top 9 things that people wanted the town to focus on relate to active transportation and trails directly: creation of walkable, bikeable neighborhoods, improving and expanding sidewalks and bike lanes, better walking and cycling infrastructure, extension of trails, age-friendly streets. These are all things that align directly with the mandate of the Trails and Active Transportation Committee. And the fact that 5 of those top 9 recommendations all directly relate to active transportation, I think really speaks to the pent-up demand for improved access to active transportation here in the town of Collingwood. Next slide, please. And it was the same story in the budget feedback. Traffic calming, climate change specialist, climate emergency. I think with us knowing that transportation accounts for the vast majority of our personal greenhouse gas emissions, that also aligns very closely. But trails and parks repairs and maintenance, bike lanes, these all came out as priorities in the budget feedback as well. So I think that, the piece that I just want to drive home here is that the community is very consistently and very loudly asking for heavier investment in active transportation. And if you go to the next slide, the things that I'm really pleased about is that the town is listening. And that's what I really want to highlight with our 2021 goals. So our priorities as a committee are to implement the Maple Street Quiet Street pilot project. That is a key north-south connection that we see as an absolute transformation for how people consider the use of street space in our community. Adding signage and pavement markings to our current bike lane routes. So this would be things like Ontario Street, Hume, and 6th, to bring the signage and pavement markings up to the provincial standard. Completing the allocated capital program, there's quite a bit in there for this year. Installing pedestrian crossings at key cycling plan locations, so that the Niagara Street crossing across Huron to get to Sunset, very important. And potentially looking at Ontario Street as well, the traffic or the train trail crossing. Assisting with the traffic calming policy, we know that that's going to be coming down the pipe, and we're excited about being able to assist with the deployment of some of those initiatives. Working on trying to finalize the George Christie nature trails and get those all really up to snuff. We'd like to double the resurfacing and widening of our existing trails to 3 kilometers this year so that we can keep up with the vegetation encroachment and keep those trails to a standard where folks are able to use them kind of side by side. The construction of the 2 downtown bike parking shelters, that's a project that's well underway. Next slide, please. Working to create a digital trails map, so to supplement our physical trails maps. Replacing the Trailway Junction gazebo at the corner of Huron and by the museum. That's really near the end of its useful life, so we really do need to see what we can do there to create a fantastic public space that highlights our trails and our history. And then we want to get out and talk more to the community about trails and active transportation. And finally, advance that Collingwood to Village route. So I highlight all these goals. Next slide, please. Just to say that, when I show all those ongoing inputs from the community, the official plan, the budget input, and the fact that those things are such priorities, when we look at the budget and the process that's coming down the pipe for 2021, we see that the town is really responding. And I just want to share a little anecdote really quickly about the way that the town responds. There's a little trail connection at the south end of Maple Street, and it connects to Findlay. So it's from Findlay and it connects up to Maple, and it's the only way to get from that kind of south side of south of Findlay to the northernmore part of the city without going on here, Ontario, or on High Street. There's no other way to get through that area. We noticed that it was not being cleared. We put that out to town staff. Within 24 hours, it had been added to the Public Works Department's clearing schedule, and it had been cleared of some ice and snow. The town is so responsive, is so respectful, and is so reactive. And we are just so appreciative as a committee of the amazing work the town staff is doing. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with them to implement these 2021 goals and see this year be a real banner year for trails and active transportation in the town of Collingwood. Next slide, please. And I think that's my last one. Yep, there it is. So I just, I just want to say a big thank you to the committee and a huge thank you to all the staff that have supported the work that we've been doing. In particular, Executive Director Culver, Manager Wendy Martin, John Velick, Peggy Slama, and of course of course Stephanie at the committee. Everyone's just been amazing, and we couldn't do it without them.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate that. Before I turn to council, I'm going to turn to the public to see whether there is any comment, concern, questions, queries regarding the presentation that just took place.
Thank you. So those attending tonight, if you wish to comment on the Trails and Active Transportation presentation, please press the raise your hand feature or press *9 on your phone. All right, we do have a member of the public that wishes to speak, so we will allow them.
There we go.
Oh, sorry guys, the unmute button. Hey, it's me. It's Matt. I didn't expect you guys to have the double meeting. This is a good little presentation. I would like to ask the fellow that's presenting if they have money in their budget. I was down there today at Circle Park and Harborview, and a concern about the, I don't know, increased shoreline work that needs to be done. Would he be able to comment about a potential boardwalk near the labyrinth covering the shore trail there for, wildlife protection and stuff like that? I'd like to ask the person if they have money or if they've been talking about that.
Thank you. I'll pass that through to Mr. Jones.
So through the chair, it's not something that we've engaged in discussion about. I think that's something that would have to go, that's a much more detailed discussion in terms of engineering and, probably working with the NVCA there as well. So it would be a longer term discussion that I think we'd have to have. And hopefully, hopefully the water levels start to go back down, but who knows?
Thank you. Does that suffice, Mr. Priddy?
Is there a chance to just respond to
that? You can ask another question.
Just quickly, does he have any funding for this? So one of the big things that Mayor Saunderson was saying was like needing of funding, not from our budget, not from municipal budget, but from federal money. Is there anything we can do to raise that and the need for the work that has to be, there does need to be work done. It's just when we can do it. I'd like to ask him that.
Mr. Jones, can you respond to that?
I think I saw that it looks like maybe does Executive Director Culver want to field that one?
Director Culver?
Thank you, Chair. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're speaking about the trail just a little to the side of the labyrinth and stretching along the shoreline. And I think we've already mentioned to Council and Mr. Priddy that the plan there is to get an ecologist to help us determine the risk to the turtle population. It's not really clear that there is what the risks are and how we could mitigate them. So we want to get some professional advice first. And that will determine what we do there. So whether or not we create amenities for the turtle migration or the turtle, spawning, or we have to go all the way to a boardwalk. We're just not sure at this point until we get that kind of level of professional advice. So that's the first step. After that, we'll determine what the capital needs are, and we'll move forward either with funding we have or approach Council.
Thank you for that response.
Terrific. Thank you so much for calling in. Any other members of the public who would wish to participate in our meeting this evening?
No, there is not.
Thank you. And so we receive the report from the Trails and Active Transportation Committee, and then no, we ask questions first, don't we? It's like a first day with a new toy. I can't remember what happens now. The committee receives it, yes?
Correct.
So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Thank you, Vice Chair Madigan and Councillor Comey. And do we have questions, concerns, queries for Mr. Jones? Councillor Comey.
Through you, Chair. Just to thank Justin for hanging around so late and making a second presentation. We really appreciate it. There is no doubt that your committee does a lot of work, and as you pointed out earlier, hands-on work. And I think it was so gracious of you to acknowledge the great support that you're receiving from the town. This seems like a very wonderful synergy happening right now. As you pointed out with both your data, the feedback we're getting from the public about active transportation and the green movement, and this fantastic committee that's willing to put the work in and the support from the town. I think it will be a great year. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Clerk Comey. Any other, Clerk Holmes?
Sorry, I will let the vote carry on, but after your vote, I would like to interrupt.
Okay, thank you. I have a comment to make regarding that, or actually a question, Mr. Jones, and that is one of my big dreams in life is to ride my bicycle from my house to the village and back on a Saturday afternoon, have a nice filling breakfast or something. What would you say, if you were a betting man, would be the year that I will get to do that?
Unfortunately, we're kind of there already. You know, we have the route that it's a little bit more circuitous than the route that we would prefer, taking the village to Collingwood route. But you can, and we're aiming to actually get this signed this year for the Beach to Blue route, where you would go out on 6th, out to Grey Road. Is it 19? Yeah, 19, where you go up to Tees Please. And as soon as you get to the stoplight at Tees Please, you get across the street and you are then on a trail that goes past the Windfall development. And from that trail, you then hook into the bike lane at the roundabout, and you can take that right to the village. So it's a little bit more circuitous than the village route, but we are hopeful that the Collingwood to Village Trail will be completed within the next 5 years. We think that we are getting closer and closer every single year. We're clearing more of the regulatory hurdles in terms of getting the NBCA on side, in terms of getting more of the landowners on side. And so here is hoping that we will see that beautiful trail along Mountain Road. Once Mountain Road becomes, has the reconstruction done, we'll see that trail concurrently to that development.
Terrific. Thank you. I look forward to riding that.
Me too.
So with that, we will thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys, and yeah, I know it's been a long day for all of y'all. So thank you for sticking with me.
Clerk Holmes.
Sorry, we'll just do the vote to receive the report. And sorry, I interrupted and caused the confusion. So I'll let you vote first, and then I'll interrupt.
So we have a mover and a seconder to accept the report, and all those in favor. There we go. Now.
Perfect. I just want to interrupt. We've had an individual that had requested to be a delegation last week, and he has been waiting very patiently since we did go longer than our SIC meeting. So if the committee consents, I would support moving that delegation forward at this time.
I'm very happy to do that. Any objections from members of the committee? Vice Chair Madigan.
Thank you very much. No one anticipated the meeting going this late tonight. So I actually have to be somewhere at 8 o'clock. So if I do leave, please accept my apologies and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. And so, okay, we're going to move item number 9 up on the agenda to now, and that is our public delegations. And we have 5 minutes, and we have our speaker who is, I think at this minute, being led into the meeting.
Yes, and his name is Richard Smith. So he will be presenting to the committee regarding concerns with the marina.
Thank you for joining us, we have a Mr. Smith and a Mr. Jones in the same meeting. Okay. Oh, did we lose him?
Are
you able to see me?
Ah, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, I've got a couple of points regarding the marina, which has been an ongoing issue for me for many years in Collingwood. Collingwood is a place to live and work and play. I do live here. I worked here prior to my retirement, and I cycle, teach skiing, and I sail out of Thornbury. So my question is regarding rules, policies, and regulation. And my primary issue for discussion is the removal of individuals on the Collingwood Marina waiting list if you decline twice. And I've been on that list for many years. I will say at least 5, perhaps more. I've been offered slips twice. I have declined twice. And I learned this year that my name had been deleted from the list because of 2 declines. Now, I will admit that for 8 years I've been in Thornbury. I'm 71. I have a partner on my boat who lives in Wasaga Beach that came on board this past year, and I would dearly love to sail out of the Collingwood Marina. And I think with being a member of a marina, we have an expectation of service. And those expectations simply are a safe place to store our boat, a slip that has safe access and egress regardless of the weather, suitable facilities, which I'll speak about in a moment, facilities, and the facilities include wide, stable docks with at least electricity, water, potable, fuel and toilet pump outs, and heaven forbid, an onshore toilet, running water and shower facilities, Wi-Fi and security. Now, I will say that in my experience in Thornbury, which is 8 years running, we have all of those things. And the list in Collingwood, when I first looked at the rules and regulations, 15 pages long, they hadn't been updated in over 4 years. This is going back about 7 years now. And I spoke to the director at the time, who said nobody's ever asked about why they hadn't been updated. Well, we didn't have much for marina 8 years ago. So currently, the list is much longer than the demand is much bigger than the availabilities. Generally speaking, our facility, and I'm not being critical or negative, has been vastly inferior when compared to Thornbury and Meaford as our 2 closest marinas. We have had poor slips, we've had no electricity, no water, no fuel, no pump outs, no onshore washrooms, no running water, no hot showers. Could it be much worse? So that's my comment from 8 years ago. Where we are now is it is very gradually been getting better. In our last mayoralty run, I sent inquiries to all of the mayoralty candidates about what the plan was for the marina in the next phase of our council. Nobody ever got back to me. However, I did speak to Sandra Cooper many times prior, and Sandra said, we have this gorgeous $50 million waterfront expansion project. It's gorgeous. We'll have this and that, this and that, this and that. And I said, well, at that time I was about 67. And I said, will I ever see this in my lifetime? After a hearty laugh, she said, not a chance. So that's a very difficult place to be, because it would be really nice to have these facilities. And to be outdone by Thornbury and Meaford, for heaven's sakes, we are the jewel on the foot of Georgian Bay. And these two other communities really put us to shame. Now, the other thing I wanted to deal with was timing. And I know I have 5 minutes and I won't go on. This is all prepared. Copies were sent to the clerk, and you will have a copy of this document. If not in front of you, you will have it if you want it. Timing is really important, because if we want to slip at another marina anywhere, you apply in the summer, they contact you in the fall, and generally you'll get an offer of a slip in early January. If you accept the slip, then money has to be paid April the 1st. Now, when I've contacted Collingwood about this, they say, well, we can't tell anybody anything until we hear whether or not people are coming back. When will that happen? Might be March, might be April, might be May, could be June. Well, we've already made our commitments. And in the case where I chose to decline twice, I had already made my commitments. I paid $2,200 for my slip, $300 for winter storage of my boat. And you see, I had done, I'm sorry. And my launch fee of $250. It was already paid. So I was $2,750 in the hole, and I was offered a slip that had no electricity, it had no running water, and no bathrooms. So I declined. Next time I was offered, the slips were better. There was still no electricity, still no running water, and we had 2 porta potties. Now, I don't know, we do have several women on council, and I would say, and I'll ask you the question, 2 plastic porta potties with no running water, no showers, barely sanitary, smelly, total minimalist facility that barely serves the public, visitors to Collingwood, and marina clients. How would you like a 10-minute visit to a porta potty on a 95-degree July day after you've been out on the water for 6 or 8 hours? It's not fun. It smells, and it is not fair to people who rely on our facility and pay really, really good money. Like, you pay the same money as what you're asking. Now, I did speak to Ms. Skinner about the cost, and she said, yeah, well, at $67 a foot for boats, it's less than the other places. Well, yes.
That's your timer going off.
I'm sorry?
That's the end of your 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. So what I've asked is, I'll summarize in less than a minute. I've asked for my original place to be reinstated. I found that I had been deleted, which I was never advised of, and I think that that's wrong and inappropriate. I've asked to be put into my rightful position, which would be in the top 5. But I was friendly and nicely said that I'm actually on number 71 as of January 2021. And that is wrong. It's not right. All the clerk has to do is ask whether I want to remain on the list or not. If yes, next year. If not, take me off.
Thank you.
All. Thank you very much for the extra minute.
Thank you so much for coming to see us with these concerns. Clearly, you are frustrated, and it sounds as though perhaps some tweaking of our processes may need to take place. I'm going to thank you for your time, and I will also direct you to our Parks and Recreation staff. And
I've spoken to everyone.
There's our
single person.
Well, there's our executive director right now. Dean, is there anything you can tell us about what's about to happen in 2021 that might be of some assistance to Mr. Smith at this time?
Through you, Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have anything based on the policy that currently exists. I don't have anything to offer him in terms of the spot on the waiting list. It is a policy we've had in effect for a couple of years. It actually isn't a policy we invented. We've actually taken it from such places as Thornbury, who has the identical policy.
No, they don't. That's
I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. That's not how we conduct business.
Actually, through you, Chair, I mean, I'm happy to also share my screen and show the waitlist policy in Thornbury, which actually literally identifies identical policy to ours. And Mr. Smith is welcome to go to the Thornbury website and see that. But having said that, I will take away, Mr. Smith has offered some advice in respect of things like our communication with waitlist holders, which we agree can be improved upon. We also are taking a look at, right now, our renewal period starts on November 1st, after the last boat comes out of the water on October 31st. But we actually think that we can back that up and start talking to people on the wait list sooner by virtue of getting renewals done sooner. So we're going to take that under advisement and look to improve our policies that way. There is some useful information that Mr. Smith has shared to us that we'd be really happy to take a look at engaging to improve. And I'll also state, for whatever it's worth, we're doing the best we can to improve the marina as fast as we can. We've made some significant investments. The town, I should say, the taxpayers have made some significant investments in the harbor. The latest expense is wave break to be delivered in September, delayed by COVID last year. That will help protect the southern docks. We invested in the promenade to add more transient space. The washrooms are a huge concern for us, but we're actually going into a terminals building redevelopment program, which may see the Harbor Spit roadway improve, which would allow us to have servicing brought to the site. The EPCOR change right now is in the process of moving electricity around the site, and we've leveraged that to try and get electricity closer to the docks, so one day we can apply it to the docks. We're doing the best we can. There is a waterfront master plan that has a lot of conceptual guidance for this, and we're doing the best we can to move it forward. So I'll leave that. If there's any questions from the committee, I'm happy to answer them now.
Thank you, Executive Director Culver. Is there any questions from the committee or comments? Councillor Comey.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I would just, like to say to our deputant, it is hard when you feel frustrated by a situation. I think you raised a lot of fair points about the washroom. I'm always a sympathetic ear to the washrooms. I do use the porta potty down there all summer, and I have advised Director Culver and CAO Skinner, they continue to look for other options. I hope as a town, we're continuing to look for those external hand washing stations to make it a little more sanitary the best we can with the situation we have. I will share that Director Culver, I think it's also true, some adjustments are made to the porta potty at the Harborfront this year. Like I think, and I know this from my dad, I think they were up high, and then him and Bing Jowett, they needed them brought down low. They were kind of raised. So people do give feedback, and the town does respond the best it can. And I hope they continue to add more porta potties, because that's all we got right now. Add more of them, look for more ways to get better sort of hand washing options down there. And I'm just so sorry for your frustration. I'm hopeful that our staff will continue to communicate with you the best they can.
Thank you, Councillor Comey. And I would add to that that I hear your frustration, Mr. Smith, and I share it, having spent some time running down at the Harborfront as well, and having to dash into a porta potty is less than fun. And I, especially in a hot summer day, I do appreciate what you were saying there. Oh, did you have something else that you wanted to say? Oh, can we unmute Mr. Smith for in reply? I don't have that power. There we are. You're unmuted, sir.
Thank you. I would actually ask that we don't get too overly focused on porta potties. It's not my point. The point is deleting people from the waiting list. I think when we listen to Dean Culver, it's very apparent that we have a minimal facility here. We don't have power, we don't have water, we don't have docks. It goes on and on and on. We have terrible locations of the docks. We get blown onto the rocks coming into the Collingwood Harbor. It's terrible. And that's why we're getting some breakwaters. The point is that if I choose not to take that and accept a vastly superior facility for the same price, don't we get the message that it's time to make it better and stop deleting people? Every year we do some things, and that's great. I love it, and I'm thrilled about it. There's a little bit more, it gets a little better. Collingwood is doing their part. We're trying, but we are so vastly put behind by Thornbury of all places who've had the facility they have for over 8 years. Now, I will acknowledge they have federal funding. We don't.
Right.
Okay.
I'll thank you for your time this evening, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair McLeod. You've been awesome. So all of you do have copies of my document.
Super.
Okay.
And we will continue to encourage staff to keep things moving along down at the Harbourfront. Was there another deputant tonight, Clerk Almas?
At this point, no, there is not.
We'll return to our agenda and item number 7, which is the consent agenda. And the motion is that council herein receive the general consent agenda and that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda are those of the author and are not verified or approved as being correct. And the item is 7.1. It is a letter from the Curling Club of Collingwood. I don't have to recuse myself as a member for accepting this letter, do I? I don't think so. And so we'll move to receive the consent agenda items. Moved by Councillor Berman and seconded by Vice Chair Madigan. And any comments or questions from the committee? No? Thank you. Then we vote to accept those. Yes. All in favor? Thank you. Item number 8, departmental updates. Do we have any of those this evening?
I believe, Chair McLeod, that Executive Director Culver will be speaking to the B City program request that was added.
Yeah, my apologies. I was writing a quick note to all of you.
Sorry, Dean, sorry to interject. Chair McLeod and the rest of the committee, I'm going to take my leave now. Enjoy your evening and great success with the rest of the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Executive Director Culver.
Yeah, no, my apologies. So really quickly, I believe this committee and all of council are aware of the B City initiative that was brought before council. I think we'll call it a technical oversight. We didn't catch that we needed to get approval from council to obtain the mayor's signature on the proclamation that announces our intent to become a B City. So simply we're asking for permission from council to apply the mayor's signature so that we can move forward with that initiative. That's all.
Thank you. What needs to happen do we have to take a vote on a motion to that effect? And so moved by Councillor Berman and seconded by Councillor Comey. Any conversation regarding this item? All those in favor? Well, that was easy. No other departmental updates, and we have other business then. We move on to item number 10. Is there any other business from members of this council or of this committee? I have a piece of other business, and it also involves Executive Director Culver. And I have a question that I would like to ask him. And that is regarding trails, since it's interestingly enough, we had a discussion with Mr. Jones regarding trails today. I'd like if you could be so kind as to clarify for me, Executive Director Culver, the status of the trail which runs, I think it's actually called the Hamilton Drain Trail, which runs between the Pretty River Estates subdivision and the Indigo subdivision. I noticed when I was skiing earlier this week that there are barriers up on that trail, and I wondered why that might be, because as I understand it from the Snowmobile Club, there is access to that trail for snowmobiles that is allowed through bylaw. And I wonder if you could speak to that for us this evening, briefly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the barriers were put in place in response to some complaints we received from a couple of individuals in the Pretty River Estates subdivision regarding the presence of snowmobiles when the trails weren't actually intended to be turned on, as it were, for that at that time. The bylaw refers to the trails as access routes to get to the OFSC trails. So technically speaking, when the OFSC trails are turned off, those accesses should not be used. But having said that, some individuals got excited with the first few snowfalls and started using the trails and actually using even OFSC branches illegally. So we did what we do, which is get in touch with the OPP and look for enhanced enforcement. It's a very difficult thing to try and catch snowmobilers who are operating at random times. So we put the barricades up basically to signal that it was pedestrian only, left enough of a pedestrian gap. It seemed to work somewhat as a deterrent or a reminder to snowmobilers that they shouldn't be on those trails. And then once the OFSC trails opened up, I will say we kind of forgot they were there because we're busy with a lot of things. But at the same time, we also heard from one of the concerned individuals at Pretty River Estates that they were working as a bit of a speed barrier. So it caused the snowmobiles to have to wiggle a little bit. And so we decided just to leave them there if it means that it slows them down a little bit, because speed is another concern on that trail. But I can confirm that it is a trail that is an access route for snowmobiles currently under bylaw 2015-095, I think it is. And yeah, so that's what it's for, is to help snowmobilers get to the OFSC trails and enjoy the regional trails.
And so as a follow-up, to you, Executive Director Culver, it is perfectly legal for a snowmobile that is legally permitted to be on that piece of trail in town. And,
correct.
And will remain so unless we change the bylaw.
Correct. Yeah, as long as they're abiding by the speed limit, which is 20 kilometers per hour, period. And as long as they're, obviously permitted under the OFSC, they're allowed to be on that trail.
And then barriers will remain in an effort to try and help everybody get along nicely.
It's just a reminder not to go fast. It's a bit of a straightaway back there. I could see people teasing their speed, but really people need to be mindful because there are pedestrians nearby, and that's what the point of any measure that we take to slow people down is all about, is slowing the machines down because the pedestrians are more vulnerable.
Thank you. I'm happy to have clarification on that so that I can pass it along to those who are talking to me about it. Is there any other business for this committee this evening? Seeing none, I think that moves us into the adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Berman and all of those in favor. There we go. That was a long evening. Thank you so much for everyone's time and attention. Good night.